I stake my daughter." The words fell across the green baize like a dropped glass, and for the length of one held breath, no one in the Mayfair gaming salon moved. The candles in the great branched chandelier burned high and gold, and every flame seemed to lean toward the table where Sir Hugh Fenwick sat with his empty purse turned inside out before him, and his daughter standing at his shoulder in a red gown that had once been her mother's. Rowena Fenwick did not scream. She had learned, in the long, slow ruin of her father's fortune, that screaming spent a thing she could not afford to lose, and so she folded her gloved hands at her waist and pressed one thumb flat against the other, and she let no part of what she felt reach her face. "Say it again," said the man across from her father. "I would have the room hear it plainly." Silas Merrick was not a large man, but he filled a chair as though he had bought it. He wore pale primrose silk and a diamond at his throat, and he smiled like a cat at a door it knows will open. He had spent the season buying the debts of ruined men as other gentlemen bought horses. And tonight he had come to collect the last of Sir Hugh's, and everyone at the table understood that the baronet had nothing left but the girl. "You heard me," Sir Hugh said. His voice cracked in the middle. £6,000 I owe you, Merrick, and I cannot pay a farthing of it. So I put her on the table. My daughter, against the debt. One hand of cards. If you win, the marker is torn and she is yours too to arrange as you see fit. If I win, the marker is torn and I owe you nothing. And if a third man buys in? Said a voice from the shadows at the room's edge. It was a low voice, unhurried, and it changed the air. Rowena turned toward it before she knew she meant to. A gentleman had risen from a chair beside the cold hearth, where he had sat so still she had not marked him, and now he came forward into the candlelight, and the whole crowded room seemed to rearrange itself to make him room. He was tall, and dressed in deep peacock velvet worked with old gold, and his hair was near black, and swept back from a hard, clean brow, and his eyes were the gray of a sky before weather. She did not know his face. She knew, without being told, that it was a face accustomed to being obeyed. "This is a private matter, Your Grace," Merrick said, and something moved under his smoothness, something that had not been there a moment before. So he was a duke. Rowena filed the word away without letting it warm her. "It stopped being private," the Duke said, when he spoke his stake aloud in a room of 40 men. "You have made it a public sale. I am a member of the public." He drew out the chair at the third side of the table and sat, and he set a folded paper upon the baize, and he unfolded it with 2 fingers so that the room could see the sum written there. "I hold 4,000 of Merrick's own paper, bought quietly this spring. Debts he owed to a house in the Strand, which I purchased from that house. I will add it to the pot. Whoever wins the hand wins the girl's marker and cancels mine. Merrick, you cannot afford to sit this one out. Deal." A murmur went round the salon like wind in dry grass. Rowena looked from the calm gray eyes to the diamond trembling at Merrick's throat, and she understood 2 things at once. The first was that the stranger had come to this room already knowing what would be staked. The second was that she was, to every man at this table, a marker, a torn scrap of paper with a number on it, and not one of them had asked her name. "I have not agreed to be played for," she said. The words dropped into the hush, and every head turned. Her father made a small, wounded sound. Merrick laughed, delighted. "Listen to it talk," he said. But the Duke did not laugh. He looked up at her, and for the first time his stillness cracked, and something passed behind his eyes that she could not name and would spend a long time afterward trying to. "No," he said quietly, "you have not. And I give you my word before all these witnesses that whatever this table decides, You will not be handed to any man against your will tonight. Not to him, not to me. Sit, if you would rather, or stand and watch. But do not think, madam, that the winning of a piece of paper wins you. It does not. I would not have it if it did. She did not sit. She stood at her father's shoulder, and she watched the cards fall. They dealt 3 hands. Rowena had kept her father's accounts for 6 years, ever since her mother died and the money began to go, and she had a mind that could not help but count, and so she counted the cards as they turned, as she counted everything, silently, out of an old habit she had never been able to break. She saw Merrick's hand build toward a certain thing. She saw the Duke's build toward nothing at all, a scatter of low cards, a losing spread by any reckoning. And she saw, on the last turn, the Duke set down a card that threw away a winning line he could have taken, and take instead the one card that beat Merrick by the width of a single pip. He had not played to win money. He had played, precisely and coldly, to win her marker and lift it out of Merrick's reach, and he had thrown away 4,000 pounds of his own to be certain of it. Merrick came half out of his chair, his silk creasing, his face gone the color of tallow. You cheated. I counted, the Duke said. As I think, did the lady. It is not against the rules of this house to be able to add. He gathered the torn markers toward him, both of them, hers and his own, and he stood. He was very tall in the gold light. He turned to Rowena, and he did not reach for her, nor did he command her. He held out his hand, palm up, open, an offer, and not a grip. She leaves with me, he said to the room, and not to her. Then, lo, for her alone, if she chooses to. The choice is the only part of this that was ever hers, and I will not take it from her too. Behind them Sir Hugh had sunk forward with his face in his hands. Merrick was speaking, fast and furious, to the men around him, and the word forgery was already in his mouth like a seed he meant to plant. The chandelier blazed. The spilled guineas on the baize caught the light and threw it up into her face, and Rowena Fenwick looked at the open hand of a duke whose name she did not know, and made the first free choice she had been offered in longer than she could remember. She put her hand in his, not because she trusted him. She trusted no one who sat at that table. She did it because his was the only hand in the room that had been offered rather than closed, and because a woman who has been counted as a debt learns to know the difference between a door held open and a door held shut. She would keep her own counsel. She would keep her own accounts, as she always had. But she would not spend one more hour under her father's roof waiting to be sold to Merrick in some darker room without candles. I choose to leave, she said. Not with you. From here. That you happen to be the door is your good fortune, your grace, not mine. The almost smile again, there and gone. I will take a door over nothing, he said. Come, the salon parted for them. 40 gentlemen and a scattering of powdered ladies drew back their skirts and their boots, and every one of them looked at the girl in the red gown as though a price were still pinned to her sleeve. Rowena kept her chin level and her eyes forward, and her count going in her head. The old private arithmetic. 7 steps to the doors, 4 candles guttering. One father she did not turn back to look at. She had learned long ago that a face kept still was a wall no gossip could climb. At the top of the stairs a footman had her cloak, and the night air came up cold and clean off the wet street. A black carriage waited with its lamps lit, and a crest on the door she did not recognize. She stopped on the last step. I do not know your name, she said. Adrian Vane, Duke of Harcourt. He said it plainly, without the little flourish men used when they expected a name to do their charming for them. You have my house at your disposal tonight, and a locked door between your room and every other in it, the key on your side. My housekeeper is a dragon of 60 years who will sit outside it if you wish her to. In the morning, you will be under no obligation to me you did not choose. I give you that as a debt I owe you, not a favor I grant. You owe me nothing. I owe you a great deal, he said. I sat in that room and watched your father lay you on a table, and I did not stop it before it was spoken. I only stopped it after. That is a thing I shall have to live with. The least I can do is not become the next man to arrange your life for you. She let him hand her into the carriage, because the alternative was to stand freezing on a step while the whole street learned her story, and she sat with her back straight against the squabs and her hands folded, and she watched him across the dark of the box as the wheels began to turn. He did not sit beside her. He took the facing seat, as far from her as the carriage allowed. And he looked out the window and left her the silence, and she found that the courtesy unsettled her more than boldness would have. You bought Merrick's debts in the spring, she said at last, long before tonight. Why? He was quiet a moment. Because I have watched that man buy up ruined men all season like a butcher buying old horses, and I wanted to know what he meant to do with them. A man does not spend a fortune on other men's failures for the pleasure of the paper. He is building something. I have not yet learned what. But when I heard, 3 days ago, whose daughter's name had come up in his cups, heard him say he would have the Fenwick girl one way or another before the season turned, I understood that whatever he is building, you are a stone in it. So I came to the table. I did not know he would make your father say the words aloud. That part was worse than I feared. The cold went down her spine and settled. He said my name, before tonight, to other men. He said your name, Harcourt agreed, with a particularity that I did not like, as though it were not chance that you were on his list, but the point of the list. I do not yet know why. I intend to. Rowena turned that over. She thought of her father's ledgers, the ones she had kept these 6 years. Every debt and every payment entered in her own small hand, because the baronet could not be trusted to record what shamed him. She thought of a morning last spring when a clerk of Merrick's had come to the house and asked, very politely, to see the accounts, and how she had refused him at the door, and how he had gone away smiling. She had thought nothing of it then. She thought a great deal of it now. I keep accounts, she said slowly. My father's. All of them. I have since I was 17, since my mother died and the money began to leak out of the house like water out of a cracked jug. Everything he owes and everything he was owed, every note and every marker, in a book in my own hand. I know to the shilling what my father's ruin is made of. That is not a common thing for a baronet's daughter to know. No, Harcourt said softly. It is not, and she saw him look at her then. Really look. The gray eyes moving over her face as though he were revising some estimate he had made and finding the sum larger than he had allowed. You counted the cards tonight. I saw you do it. You knew I had thrown the fourth hand before I laid it down. I count everything, she said. I cannot stop. It is the only thing in my life that has never once lied to me. The carriage rocked over the cobbles. He was silent a moment longer, and when he spoke again his voice had changed, had lost the cool public evenness, and gained something rougher underneath. There is a thing I must say to you now, before we reach the house, so that you may sleep tonight knowing it. I hold your marker, the torn one, from the table. By the custom of that room it makes a claim on you, and there are men who would enforce it. I will not. He drew the folded scrap from his breast and held it out across the dark between them, and she saw that his hand was not quite steady. "It is yours. Burn it tonight in your own grate, and there is an end of it. And you walk out of my house in the morning owing me nothing and bound to me by nothing, and I will see you settled somewhere safe and never trouble you again. That is the first choice, and it is the honest one, and I set it before you first, because a man who wanted you would be tempted to set it last." She looked at the paper. She did not take it. "And the second choice?" "The second," he said, and here at last the evenness cracked clean through, "is that you do not burn it, that you let it stand, not as a debt, but as a beginning, that you come to Harcourt as my wife, in name to the world, and in truth only as fast as you wish and no faster, with your own rooms and your own key and your own accounts, and that we discover, without hurry and without any lie between us, whether the door I held open tonight was the only good thing about me or merely the first. I will not pretend the second choice costs me nothing to offer, because it does not. But it is still yours to make, and I will hold the paper out to you as long as you need, and take no offense whichever way your hand moves." For a while the only sound was the wheels. Rowena Fenwick looked at the marker in his outstretched hand, the scrap of paper that was, to the whole world, the price of her, and she did not burn it, and she did not take it. "I will keep it myself," she said, "and decide when I am ready, and not before. Give it here. A woman should hold her own price, your grace, if anyone is going to." Something eased in his face that she had not known was clenched. He laid the marker in her palm, and his fingers did not close on hers, though she felt the warmth of them a hair's breadth away, and the not touching was louder than any touch. "Adrian," he said, "when there is no room to perform for, I would rather be a name than a title." "I will decide that too," she said, and closed her hand around the paper, "when I am ready." Harcourt House stood behind iron gates at the quiet end of a square, tall and dark and shuttered, with only a few windows lit. The dragon of a housekeeper proved to be real, a spare gray woman named Mrs. Pettibone, who took one look at Rowena's borrowed gown and her borrowed courage, and softened by a degree no one but Rowena would have measured. She was given a room with a good fire and a bolt on the inside of the door, and she slept, against all expectation, the whole night through, with the marker under her pillow like a tooth she meant to keep. In the morning she did not run. She had lain awake at dawn, turning the two choices over, burn it or keep it, gone or wed, and had found that she wanted neither yet, and that what she wanted instead was to understand the man before she owed him anything or fled him for nothing. So she came down to breakfast, and she said so. "I will stay a fortnight," she told him across a table long enough to seat 20 and laid for 2. "As your guest, and nothing more. At the end of it I will have decided, and you will abide by whatever I decide, and if either of those conditions displeases you, say so now, and I will go this hour." "Neither displeases me," Harcourt said. "Stay a year if a fortnight is too short. The house is too large for one man. It has been too large for a long time. A fortnight," she said. "I do not make bargains I have not counted the cost of, and I have not yet counted this one." She buttered her bread with great composure. "You may begin by telling me why a duke lives like a man expecting bailiffs. Your knocker is muffled. Half your rooms are shut. Your footman turned his cuff to hide that it is frayed. Either you are miserly, your grace, which I would forgive, or you are in trouble, which interests me more." He set down his cup. For a moment she thought she had gone too far, and then he laughed, a short startled sound, as though the laugh had got out before he could stop it. "You have been in my house 11 hours, and you have read my ledgers off my footman's sleeve." "I read accounts," she said. "It is the only language I am truly fluent in." "Are you in trouble? Or are you a miser?" "Trouble," he admitted. "My father left the title clean, and the estate a swamp. There are 3 stewards who have each told me a different sum for what Harcourt owes and what Harcourt is owed, and I have come to suspect that at least one of them is robbing me, and I cannot prove which. Because the books are a wilderness, and I never had the patience to hack through them." He looked at her, and the gray eyes had sharpened. "You keep your father's accounts to the shilling. You said so last night. You were not boasting. You meant it." "I never boast about numbers. Numbers make a liar of anyone who does." "Then I will make you an offer that has nothing to do with markers or marriage," he said. "Look at my books, not as my wife, not as my guest even. As a clerk I am hiring for a fortnight at an honest wage, paid into your own hand, yours to walk away with. Find me which of my stewards is a thief. I would rather owe the truth to a stranger than go on being robbed politely by men who bow." Rowena Fenwick felt something she had not felt in 6 years of keeping her father's shameful accounts in the dark. She felt useful in the open and wanted for the one thing she was proud of. She hid it, because she hid everything, but she could not keep it entirely out of her voice. "Show me the muniment room," she said. "And send for strong tea. If your books are the wilderness you say, I shall be some hours, and I cannot think on an empty pot. If this tale has already found the quiet place in you where the old fireside stories live, take a moment to subscribe and settle in by this fireside, for the fire is high, and the night is far from over, and the man who called forgery across a gaming table has not finished with either of them yet." The muniment room was worse than he had promised. Ledgers lay in drifts, rent rolls curled with damp, loose markers and notes of hand slipped between pages at random, whole years entered in 3 different hands and none of them agreeing. Rowena took off her rings and rolled back her cuffs and sat down in the middle of it, and she began, as she always began, at the beginning, which is the only place accounts can honestly be started from. Harcourt lingered at the door. "You may go," she said without looking up. "I work faster without a duke watching me as though the numbers might bolt." "I find," he said, "that I do not much want to go." She looked up then. He stood in the doorway with the morning behind him, and he was not looking at the ledgers. He was looking at her ink-smudged hands and her rolled cuffs and the frown of concentration she had forgotten to hide, and the look on his face was not the look men gave the girl in the red gown at the table. It was closer and quieter, and it made the space between them feel suddenly like a held breath. "Then sit," she said, "and be silent, and hand me the volume marked with the broken seal when I ask for it, and do not, whatever you do, tell me what you think the answer is. I want the books to tell me, not you. The books have no reason to lie to me. You have several." He sat. He was silent. And over the long gold afternoon, as she worked her way down through the wilderness of his accounts, and he passed her volumes without being asked twice, the distance between the clerk and the duke closed by some measure that neither of them entered in any book. The days of the fortnight went by, like beads slipped along a string. Rowena made the great cold house smaller and warmer without seeming to try. She learned that the frowning footman was called Tobias, and that his cuff was frayed because his wages were 3/4 in arrears, and she found the entry that proved it and set it before Harcourt without a word. And the wages were paid that afternoon, and the frown eased. She shortened the endless dining table by half its leaves so that two people need not shout across it. She learned the name of every servant and used it, and the house, which had held its breath around its master for years, began by slow degrees to breathe. "You have done something to my household," Harcourt said one evening, standing at the muniment room window while she worked. "I cannot name it. The stairs sound different. Cook has begun to sing. What have you done?" "I have called people by their names and paid them what they were owed," she said, not looking up from the column she was footing. "It is not sorcery, Your Grace. It is arithmetic with manners. It is more than that." He was quiet a moment. "My mother was the last person who made this house feel lived in. She has been dead 19 years. I had forgotten the sound of it." She let her pen rest. It was the first soft thing he had told her about himself, offered and not extracted, and she understood what it had cost a guarded man to say it. "Then I am glad the stairs sound different," she said gently, and went back to her column. Because she did not yet know what else to do with tenderness handed to her across a room, having had so little practice at catching it. And then, on the 9th day, she found the thing that changed everything. She had run the thieving steward to ground already a Mr. Colby, who had been entering the same cartload of timber as 3 separate sales for 2 years, and Harcourt had turned him off without a character. But it was while she was tracing Colby's false timber entries backward that she came upon a marker folded into the back of an old rent roll, a note of hand for £11,000, purportedly signed by the late Duke of Harcourt and made payable to one S. Merrick, dated the spring before the old Duke died. Rowena went very still. She had learned in 6 years to feel a false entry in her fingertips before her mind had finished proving it, and this paper was screaming. "Adrian," she said. She had never used the name before. It brought him across the room at once. "What is it?" "This marker. £11,000. Your father to Merrick." She laid it flat under the lamp. "It is a forgery, and I can show you how I know. And you must not touch it or breathe on it until you have looked where I am pointing." Her voice had gone quiet and certain, the voice she used only for numbers. "Here is the date. The spring before your father died. And here is your father's own hand, the flourish on the capital, which Merrick has copied cleverly. But look at the paper itself. See the watermark. This is Whatman's laid stock with the crown and shield mark, and the shield was not changed to this pattern until 2 years after the date written here. Your father could not have signed a sheet that would not be milled for 2 years yet. The hand is forged, but the paper forged the forger. Merrick made a marker for a dead man on paper that had not been born when the dead man was alive. Harcourt stared at the sheet, and then at her, and the storm-gray eyes had gone to something like awe. "You saw that in the paper, not the signature. The paper. I told you, numbers do not lie, but liars leave numbers. A false marker is only a lie about a date, and dates can always be checked against the world if one knows where to look." She sat back, and now her hands were not quite steady, because the full shape of it was coming clear to her, and it was very cold. "Adrian, he does this. Do you understand? This is not one forged note. This is his trade. He buys the ruin of dead and dying men. And where the true debt runs out, he manufactures more of it on paper no one thinks to question. And he collects against estates too weakened to fight him. My father is only one of his crop. Your father was another. There must be a dozen." She looked up, and the last stone dropped into place. And that is why he wants me, why he Harcourt stopped. Say it plainly. Because I keep dated accounts, and I keep them perfectly, and I have done it in 3 counties worth of my father's dealings, and Merrick's dealings run through my father's like a thread through cloth. Somewhere in my ledgers are the true dates that give the lie to a dozen of his forgeries. A woman who records the real day a thing happened is the single most dangerous creature alive to a man whose fortune is built on lying about days. He did not want me for my face. He wanted me because I am the witness he cannot allow to stay free in talking. Own me, and he owns my silence and my book. That is what he has been building all season. I am not a stone in it. I am the crack in it. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Harcourt reached out, and he did not take the marker. He took her hand, the ink-stained one lying flat on the table, and he closed his over it, warm and sudden and entirely without permission, and she felt the whole length of her own arm go still with the shock of being touched on purpose by a man who meant it. Then you will not stay free and talking somewhere I cannot reach you, he said, low and rough, and his thumb moved once across her knuckles and then went still, as though he had caught himself in the middle of a sentence he had not meant to begin. Whatever you decide at the end of your fortnight, burn the marker, keep it, wed me, refuse me, but do not decide to go where that man can find you alone. I could bear almost anything you chose, I think. I could not bear that. She should have drawn her hand away. She counted, out of habit, 1, 2, 3, and did not draw it away, and the not drawing away was the loudest choice she had made since she put her hand in his across the green baize. You are holding my hand, Your Grace, she said, and her voice was not as even as she wished. I am aware of it, he said. I have been aware of very little else for 9 days, and then, because he was an honest man when it mattered, he let her go, deliberately, and stepped back to a proper distance, and the space he left behind him ached like a held breath let out too slow. Forgive me. I will not do it again until you tell me I may. But I wanted you to know it was not the marker I have been unable to stop thinking of. They were married 8 days later, quietly, in the small chill church at the edge of the square, with Mrs. Pettibone and Tobias for their witnesses. Rowena had not burned the marker. She had come to Harcourt on the last morning of her fortnight and laid it on his desk unburned and said, I have counted the cost, and I find the account comes out in your favor, which surprises no one more than me. I will wed you. Not because a torn paper says I must, because I have watched you for a fortnight and the books of your character foot true, and I have never once been able to argue with a sum that foots true. It was not a swooning declaration. It was the most sincere thing she owned, and Harcourt received it as the treasure it was. The heat between them had banked, but not cooled. There had been the one deliberate touch and no more. He had kept his word and not reached for her again, and the not reaching had become its own slow fire, so that a room shared, a hand near a hand, a good night said at the foot of the stairs, all of it burned low and steady and patient. She had begun to want the closing of the distance as much as she had once wanted it kept. She had not told him so. She was still learning the language. She was 3 weeks a duchess when Merrick struck. It came as a paper, of course. Everything with Merrick came as a paper. A liveried clerk delivered it to the door, and a copy of it, by design, to every scandal sheet in London on the same morning, so that the Duke and Duchess of Harcourt read the ruin of their peace over breakfast at the same hour the whole town did. He has filed a suit in the Court of King's Bench. Rowena read aloud, her voice flat and careful, the number's voice. Against the estate of Harcourt, He sues upon a marker of £11,000 signed by your late father, which he says the estate has refused to honor. She turned the page. And there is a second part, which is worse, and is meant to be. He states to the court, and to every paper in the city, that the present Duchess of Harcourt is the same Miss Fenwick whose person he won fairly across a gaming table before 40 witnesses. That the Duke stole a settled marker from that table by a trick, and that the woman is a card-sharping adventuress who conspired with a gamester duke to cheat an honest creditor, and then married her way out of the reach of the law. He asks the court to void the marriage as founded in fraud, and restore to him what he calls his settled claim upon my person. The paper trembled once in her hand, and then went still, because she made it go still. He cannot have you, Harcourt said. His voice had dropped to the register that had emptied a gaming salon. There is no court in England that will hand a duchess to a creditor like a horse. No, Rowena agreed. He knows that too. He is not truly trying to win my person. Read what he is truly trying to win. She set the paper down and pressed it flat. He is trying to make me a liar in public before I can make him one. He knows what I found in your father's rent roll. He must know I have my father's ledgers still. 3 counties of true dates that could hang his whole trade. So he strikes first. He paints me as the forger and the fraud, the counting adventuress, so that when I stand up and say Silas Merrick forges markers, the whole town will already have been told that I am the one who cheats with paper. He is not suing to be paid. He is suing to poison the well before I can drink from it. If he wins the town's belief, my ledgers become the raving of a proven schemer, and every forgery he has ever made stays buried. Then we discredit the man before the hearing, Harcourt said. I have friends on the bench. I can have the thing thrown out. No, she said it sharply enough that he turned. If a duke's friends make it disappear behind closed doors, the town keeps the story it was fed, and I stay a card sharp in every drawing room in London for the rest of my life, and worse. Every other soul that man has robbed with forged paper stays robbed, because the one chance to expose him in the open will have been spent buying my own quiet. I do not want it thrown out, Adrian. I want it heard. In open court. With the papers watching. Her chin came up, and there was a light in her she had kept banked for 6 years. He has made the mistake of building his lie out of dates. Dates can be checked against the world. Let him stand up in a public court and read out his date. And I will stand up after him and read out the world. Give me the hearing. Give me the crowd. I have been reckoned a mere marker on a table once already. I do not intend to be counted as a liar in a courtroom. I intend to do the counting. There was a silence, and then Harcourt crossed to her and stopped a careful pace away, the old ache of the not touching between them. You understand what you are asking. If you stand up in that court and fail, you are ruined past any saving I can do, Duchess or not. I have kept accounts in the dark for 6 years so that no one could see me do the one thing I am good at, she said. I am asking you to let me do it in the light. Once, where it will matter. Yes, I understand exactly what I am asking. I have counted the cost of that too. Then, more quietly, there is one thing I am afraid of, and it is not the court. Merrick knows my books are the danger. He will try to have them before the hearing, by theft or by an order of the court to impound the Fenwick papers as evidence. If he gets the books, I have nothing. We have 9 days. The books are still at my father's house, and my father stopped. Your father, Harcourt said gently, who put you on the table. Who put me on the table, she agreed, and who is the only one who knows where in that house I hid the true ledgers. and who owes Merrick still, and who could be bought or frightened into handing them over before I reach them. Yes, my father. We must go tonight. The Fenwick house was dark when they came to it, colder inside than the street, stripped now of even the few good things that had been left when Rowena walked out of it in her mother's red gown. Sir Hugh sat alone in the book-room with one candle and a decanter. And when his daughter came in on the arm of her husband, he rose too fast and knocked the decanter and did not seem to notice the wine spreading dark across the table. You came back, he said. For the ledgers, Rowena said. Not for you. Where is the loose board under the window seat? He flinched. Rowena Merrick will send for those books, father, if he has not already, and you will hand them over. Because you always hand over whatever frightens you, and it is the one thing about you I have been able to count on my whole life. She crossed to the window seat and knelt, and worked the loose board with fingers that knew it in the dark, and lifted out an oilcloth bundle thick as a paving stone. These are 6 years of true dates. They are the only thing in this house worth the candle you are burning. I will take them now. He came here, Sir Hugh said. His voice broke. Merrick, 3 nights ago. He said if I gave him your account books, he would forgive the rest of what I owe, and let me end my days in peace. He offered me peace, Rowena, for a bundle of your ledgers. He looked at the oilcloth in her arms, and then at his own hands. I told him I did not know where you kept them. It is the first true thing I have refused a creditor in 20 years. I do not expect it to weigh against the table. I only wanted you to know I did not sell you twice. Rowena stood very still with the ledgers in her arms. She thought of her mother, who had kept these same accounts before her in the same small dated hand, who had sat her down at 7 years old and taught her that a household was only love with the sums done honestly underneath it, and who had died and left the sums to a child because the man of the house could not be trusted with them. She had begun keeping the book to save her mother's house. She had gone on keeping it because it was the last of her mother she had left. Her father had lost everything else that woman ever touched. He had at the last, and once, not lost this. It weighs, she said at last, quietly, not enough to buy back the table. But it weighs. I will remember that you refused him. She turned to the door, and then she paused. When this is over, if it goes as I mean it to, you will not sit alone in a cold house drinking your ruin. There is a cottage on the Harcourt land, and a small living, and no cards within a day's ride. You will take it, and you will grow vegetables, and you will be dull and safe and sober for the rest of your life. And you will never again in this world have anything left that is worth staking. That is not forgiveness. It is arithmetic with manners. It is the sum that foots true. Come, Adrian. In the carriage she held the oilcloth bundle against her like a child, and Harcourt watched her in the lamplight, and after a while he said, You are kinder than the account requires. No, she said. I am exactly as kind as it requires. A cottage and dull safety is precisely what he is worth. Entered honestly. Neither a penny more in cruelty, nor a penny more in mercy. My mother taught me to foot the column true. She looked out at the dark streets going by. She taught me the whole of it, everything I am that is any use. I keep the book because it is the last of her hand I have. Merrick thinks he hunts a witness. He hunts a dead woman's daughter, carrying her mother's hand across 3 counties. He will find that a harder thing to forge than a date. The hearing drew a crowd such as a common debt suit never drew, because it was not a debt suit that had been sold to the town, but a scandal. The card-sharp duchess, and the cheating duke, and the honest creditor robbed of his settled prize. They came in silks to watch a great lady stripped. The gallery was full, an hour before the judges took their bench. And among the faces, Rowena marked the very gentlemen who had drawn back their skirts from her on the salon stair, come now to see the end of the story they had begun to tell. Merrick had dressed for triumph, in dove gray and that same diamond, and his counsel laid the case out smoothly. Here was the marker of the late Duke, £11,000, dishonored by an arrogant heir. Here was the gaming table settlement, witnessed by 40 gentlemen, by which the person of Miss Fenwick had passed lawfully to his client, only to be stolen by a trick and hidden behind a hasty marriage. Here, said the counsel, gesturing at Rowena where she sat still and pale in deep blue, was a woman who counted cards, who kept secret books, who had schemed her way from a debtor's daughter to a duchess in a single season. Was the court to believe that such a creature was the honest party? Let the Duchess of Harcourt answer for herself then, Merrick said, rising, smiling, certain, if her husband will permit her the wit. Her husband, said Harcourt, on his feet before the smile had finished, will permit his wife anything she pleases, and pity the man who imagines he requires permission. Speak, madam. The court is listening. So, I think, is the town. Rowena rose. She did not raise her voice. She had learned 6 years ago that a voice kept low made a room lean in, and the whole packed gallery leaned in now to catch her. My lords, Mr. Merrick has built his suit on 2 papers, and I will speak to both, for I am, as his counsel says, a woman who keeps books, and a woman who keeps books has a great respect for a paper. The first is the marker for £11,000, signed, he says, by the late Duke of Harcourt in the spring before he died. She drew the forged marker from its folder and held it up so the light came through it. I ask the court to look not at the signature, which is cleverly copied, but at the sheet. This is Whatman's laid paper, and it bears in its weave the crown and shield watermark. My lords, I have here the papermaker's own dated record, sworn and sealed, which any of you may read. She laid it beside the marker. The maker did not cut this shield into his mold until 2 full years after the date written on this note. The late Duke was 2 years dead when the first sheet of this paper was lifted wet from the frame. A living hand cannot sign a page that will not exist until after the hand is dust. The signature is forged. But it is the paper that confesses it. And paper cannot be bullied and cannot be bought, and does not care whose diamond is at whose throat. A sound went through the gallery like a wave drawing back off shingle. Merrick's smile did not yet know it was dead. As to the second paper, Rowena went on, and now she lifted the oilcloth bundle and unwrapped it in full view. 6 years of ledgers in a dead woman's dated hand and a living woman's after. Mr. Merrick says I keep secret books as though a secret were a sin. I keep dated books, my lords, of every dealing my father ever had, and Mr. Merrick's dealings run through my father's like rot through a beam. I have marked the pages. Here is a debt he claims my father contracted on a Michaelmas when my father was demonstrably in Bath taking the waters, witnessed by a physician whose bill I also hold. Here is a marker he sold as 3 years old, which names a bank that did not open its doors until the following spring. Here is his hand, my lords, over and over, forging the past, because the past is the one country a forger believes no one else has mapped. I mapped it. I was 17 and grieving my mother, and I began to write down the truth of what was happening to my family, because it was the only power a girl in a failing house had. And I have not stopped, and it turns out that a girl writing down true dates for 6 years is the one thing in England that Silas Merrick could not forge his way around. That is why he wanted my person off the board and my books in his fire. Not for my face, for my dates. I am not the schemer in this room, my lords. I am merely the witness he could not afford to leave at liberty, and I have brought the whole of my liberty with me in an oilcloth, and set it on the table, where all of you may count it. The gallery was not silent now. The gallery was in an uproar, and the judges were calling for order, and Merrick was on his feet shouting that the books were fabrications, that the woman had written them last week, that a schemer could date a page any day she liked, and Rowena let him shout himself hoarse. And then she said one thing more, so quietly that the room hushed itself to hear it. Then send for the papermaker, and the physician, and the banker, all three of whom are in this building at my husband's charge, and let them swear to their own records, which I did not write and cannot have forged. I will wait. A true account never minds being audited. It is only the false one that cannot bear a second pair of eyes. They were sent for. They swore. And the case broke apart in open court, like ice going out on a river, and the men in the gallery who had come to see a duchess stripped saw instead a forger unmade by a woman with a book. And by the end of that long afternoon it was Silas Merrick, who was taken from the hall between two officers, on a charge of forgery that would, before another season had turned, put him on a transport ship for the far side of the world, his diamonds sold, his season done, his whole manufactured fortune unraveling one true date at a time. The crowd streamed out into the early dark, loud with the story, already reshaping it into the one they would tell, and the great hall emptied until there was only Rowena and Harcourt, and the candles the officers had lit against the falling evening. He came to her across the stone floor, and before she understood what he meant to do, the Duke of Harcourt went down on one knee before her, in the guttering light, in the public hall, where any late straggler might still see, and he took from his breast the torn gaming marker, the one from the table, the paper that had been, to the whole world, the price of her. You never burned it, he said. You kept your own price, as you said a woman should. I have carried the twin of it since that night as a thing I was ashamed of, that I ever held a paper with your name and a number on it. I will not hold it another hour. He lifted it to the nearest candle. You were staked across the bays and won by a trick of the cards. And I have hated every hour that the winning of you was a thing that happened to you instead of a thing you chose. So I burn it, not to free myself of a debt, to leave you with nothing owing in either direction, so that whatever you decide next, you decide as a free woman and not as a marker anyone ever held. The flame took the corner of the paper and ran up it, and he let it burn down almost to his fingers before he set the last of it on the stone. There, no court, no father, no creditor, no duke holds a claim on you now. You are the only person in England who owns Rowena Fenwick. I would give a great deal to be chosen by her. I will abide it if I am not. She looked down at the ash on the stone, and at the man on his knee, and she found that the count in her head had stopped for the first moment in her life, that there was no sum left to foot, that the column had come out even at last. Get up, she said, and her voice was not steady at all now. Dukes do not kneel on cold stone in empty halls. Get up, Adrian, and hear me, because I am going to say a thing once, and I have never said it before, and I do not know that I shall manage it twice. He rose. She took his hands, both of them, the way no one had taught her, and she held them and looked up into the storm-gray eyes that had found her across a room of 40 men, and had, alone among all of them, asked her nothing, and offered her a door. You have burned the paper that said I was one, she said. Good, Now understand what is left when it is gone, because this is the part that is mine to say, and no markers. I was not won, I was not bought, and I was not rescued, whatever the scandal sheets decide to print. I chose. I chose to put my hand in yours on that first night, because yours was the only open one. I chose to stay a fortnight when I might have run. I chose to wed you across your own desk with the marker still unburned, and I have chosen you every quiet morning since, without once being made to. And I choose you now, freely, owing nothing, with the ash of my price still warm on the floor between us. Not because you saved me. Because I have footed the whole account of you, Adrian Vane, every column of it, and it comes out true, and I could never in my life turn my back on a sum that foots as yours does. She drew a breath. I love you. There, I have said it. It is entered in the book now, in ink, and I do not keep false entries, so you may take it as sworn. For a man who had emptied gaming salons with his silence, the Duke of Harcourt seemed unable to find a single word. So he did not look for one. He drew his wife into his arms at last, all the careful distance of all those patient weeks collapsing at once, and he kissed her in the candlelit hall, with the whole poisoned story of the town breaking apart behind them, and Rowena, who had counted everything her whole life, stopped counting, and let the one sum she could not measure carry her where it would. They were married a second time that autumn, in the country, for their own sake, and no courts, in the little chapel on the Harcourt land with the doors thrown open to the gold October fields. A year to the day from the night at the gaming table, Rowena, Duchess of Harcourt, sat at a wide desk in a room that had once been a wilderness of drifted ledgers, and was now the most ordered room in 3 counties, and she footed the last column of the estate's accounts for the year, and found that Harcourt, which her husband's father had left a swamp, stood clear of debt, as it had not in living memory. She entered the sum in her own small dated hand, the hand her mother had taught her at 7 years old, and beneath it, out of an old habit she no longer needed, and had decided to keep anyway, she wrote the date, the true one, because the true date was the whole of her fortune, and always had been. Her father lived, as she had decreed, in the cottage at the edge of the park, growing vegetables he was proud of past all reason, sober these 12 months, no card within a day's ride, dull and safe and quietly ashamed, and by slow degrees something near to mended. He dined at the great house on Sundays. He was learning, late and clumsily, to be a grandfather, for there was by now a small dark-haired reason to learn it, a child with the storm-gray eyes and, the nurse swore, an unnerving way of watching the household as though already keeping its accounts. Silas Merrick was 3,000 leagues away by then, on the far side of a very wide ocean, his diamond long sold, his forged empire unraveled one sworn date at a time, in the courts he had once thought no one else had mapped, ruined at last not by a duke's power nor by any woman's revenge, but by the plainest thing in the world, a set of books in which someone had simply written down what had truly happened, and when. On the anniversary evening they walked out together into the cold, clean dark of the park, the Duke and his Duchess, and stood a while looking back at the great house with every window lit and warm. "A year ago tonight," Harcourt said, "a man laid you upon the bays to clear his debt, and I stood up out of the shadows and told a room full of gentlemen that she leaves with. I have wondered since whether I had any right to it. I had counted the debt, you see. I had not counted you. You had the right to open a door," Rowena said, and slid her hand into his, freely, owning nothing, choosing it. "The leaving was always mine. I have decided, by the way, about the name. when there is no room to perform for. She looked up at him in the dark. Adrian, I choose it. I have chosen all of it. And I would choose it again, every column, exactly as it foots. And so the girl who had been counted as a debt on a table lived out her days as the one woman in England who owned herself entire, keeping her honest books in her mother's honest hand, chosen and choosing, in a house that had learned again to breathe. If you've made it this far into their story, then you already know that the truest fortune a person can keep is not gold on a green table, but a clear and honest account of their own life, written down in their own hand, that no liar can forge and no creditor can seize. Stay a while by this fire and subscribe if these old tales of dignity and devotion warm you, for there is always another waiting in the candlelight. And tell me, before you go, if it had been your name upon that table, would you have kept the torn marker unburned, holding your own price as Rowena did? Or would you have set it to the flame that very first night and walked out free into the dark?